Welcome back to Context. We are joined today by Travon Muhammad, fellow UC Davis Aggie, founder and CEO of Soul Brothers and JV basketball coach at Crossroads School. Trey, great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Klein. Good morning.
Morning. So go ahead, if you don't mind, take us through your background as a coach. How did you end up coaching? What was the process of you landing your first head coaching job? Any subsequent jobs? What's the journey been like, the trials and tribulations? Tell us your story.
It was an actual accident, believe it or not. So, once we won the national championship at Davis, came home, was working, I got a degree in psychology. So I was working with underserved youth and emotionally disturbed children. And I got a phone call from my former head coach at Crossroads, Daryl Roper, and a guy named Thaddeus McGrew, who's a local legend in LA, had started a program called California Team Select, and he wanted an assistant coach on his 17U team and a head coach for his 16U team. Now, mind you, the only coaching experience I had was in my junior year in high school. I coached a little park and rec team at the Santa Monica Boys and Girls Club. By the way, we lost in the championship, and all I did was trap at half court the whole game. So that was my coaching experience. So I had none, zero. So what happened? Met with Thad. He gets me up to Nike's offices. By the way, they're a fully funded Nike program. At the time, I had no idea what I was walking into. I'm thinking I'm going to, because he was, a little backstory. So Thad, at the time when I was in high school, was working with K-Swiss. So he got us a K-Swiss deal at Crossroads. So I'm thinking I'm walking into a situation where he's gonna, got some kids. We're gonna get in the gym and get after it. Bro, he calls me in for a quote unquote interview, and we're at the Nike, I guess, regional office in LA. So next door is George Raveling. So, okay, now I'm awestruck. Okay, so now this has become a big deal. It wasn't a big deal over the phone. So I get in the office. He saw me as a player. He watched me grow up as a player. He assumed I was going to be that type of coach. So we get in the gym. Obviously, he says, okay, I'm going to bring you on. And we get in the gym in our first practice. And the guys who were trying out in the first hour to hour and a half were freshmen. They were freshmen. It was the freshman year during spring. So I'm thinking 14, 15-year-olds, maybe a few 16-year-olds. Bro, we get in the gym and it's Josh Shipp and Jordan Farmar and Trevor Ariza. But these guys aren't who they are now at that time. But what put me in awe, they're windmilling, they're shooting step back threes. They're taking off from 2 steps inside the free throw line. I'm like, these dudes are freshmen. This is insane. So now I just want to be in that atmosphere. I wasn't even thinking about coaching because I'm fresh off a championship. So it's still in my blood. I'm still wanting to go play overseas. So it's like it's boiling me. So now when we're doing drills, I'm playing real defense. I'm guarding them. When they're working on a defensive drill, I'm trying to score. So I'm hyped. Like this is where I want to be. But now I'm thinking about it as player development, not so much as X's and O's.
Mm-hmm.
So, we practiced for about a month, month and a half. We get in our first tournament. Weirdest thing, Climo. So the first game is the 17U. I'm the assistant. And I'm sitting on the edge of the bench. As the assistant, I learned from our assistants at Davis. You want to be the good cop. So when the guy gets subbed and he's bitching and cursing, hey, don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. Yeah, coach may have subbed you for this reason. Don't worry about it. Bro, it's a tie ball game or something. I found myself squatting as if I'm the head coach. I'm off the bench now. I'm yelling at guys, sprint, get back, get in the lane, do all these different things. And from that moment, I fell in love with coaching. And matter of fact, we had a whole tournament before the 16U played. When the 16U got their opportunity, the only time I sat down was at the jump ball and the start of halftime. The rest of the time, I'm pacing the sideline, full sweat. I was enamored, and I really fell in love. And that was I graduated in 98. That was 1999, bro. I've been coaching ever since. Ooh, I lost you audio-wise. Couldn't hear you, bro.
Got it on mute. I had to cough. So let me, I'll have to edit all that stuff out, but it's all good. So after, we're probably 23 at that time when we're getting out of school and you're jumping into coaching, getting your feet wet. And from there, where did it go? I know ultimately you found Soul Brothers. You end up back at the alma mater coaching. And can you tell us a little bit about your organization and then take us on the path from the rest of your coaching career to where you landed now?
Okay. So Soul Brothers, from a basketball standpoint, happened by accident. From a philanthropic standpoint, it fell in my lap. So quick story. Well, it won't be super quick, but story how we got started. So at Crossroads, which is this, I was coaching 8th grade basketball at the time, and they have a community service requirement for students to graduate. So even from middle school to the high school, there's a community service requirement. There's hours you have to put in order for you to walk that stage, get your quote unquote diploma, and go on to high school. So there were about 8 guys on the basketball team, and they found a few of their friends that they had all went to kindergarten with, and they started this shoe drive. And what they did was they put bins out in front of our carpool and bins in our alleyway at the school and collected gently worn, basically new shoes. Now, these are very well-to-do / wealthy young men. Dads are CEOs of major companies. Parents are big-time actors and actresses and directors. So these aren't like kids on financial aid. These are the wealthiest of the wealthy that happen to play sports. So they titled their project Soul Brothers. That was just the title of the project. It wasn't a nonprofit. It was nothing like that. So once our season ended, they decided they wanted to play club basketball. They didn't even call it AAU or travel ball. They called it club because that's what the term was used in their circle, their community. Mm-hmm. So they reached out to our co-founder and myself, who was my assistant coach. His name is Rich Singer, and said, hey, we want to continue to hoop. We want to stay together and play and be ready and get ready for high school. They didn't necessarily want to get on the national circuit, but they just wanted to stay together, play in some tournaments, practice, get better. We didn't have a name because they came to us with it. So because so many of them were involved in the Soul Brothers project, we said, hey, why don't we become Soul Brothers? Everyone liked it, loved it. We figured out a price. Everything was good, ready to go. We got uniforms. And about 3 months in, Climb, we're playing in a tournament, playing against this team with pretty much predominantly all Latin kids. And there's a particular kid on the team. He's about 6'2"-ish. He's an incoming freshman. So he had nice size, kind of heavy set. He's killing us, bro. He's probably finished with about 30. And I don't mean 30 like he had 22. And I'm calling it 30. I mean 30. He might have had 40. So post game, you're giving the fives. I happened to look down his shoes. He had some Vans on. So I jokingly said, damn, bro, you killed us in Vans? You couldn't even wear hoop shoes? He was like, nah, what happened? The guy who I usually share shoes with couldn't make it to the game. Huh? So now remember, this team started because of kids collecting shoes and donating them to they donated to the local Boys and Girls Clubs and the Police Athletic League in Santa Monica. So I said to the young man, I said, hey, what size shoe do you wear? He just happened to wear a 10.5, and that's the same size I was. Mm-hmm. So once we finished shaking hands, I told him to come with me to the car. So he comes with me car, I pop the trunk, give him a pair of shoes. Now, these weren't shoes from quote unquote Soul Brothers. These were my personal shoes.
Right.
So I give him the shoes. I go back in the gym. His coach approaches me and said, hey, man, I just want to tell you something. He's been playing our program for 2 years. He's never owned a pair of basketball shoes. So he said, listen, he's in the corner right now. He's in tears. He's so happy. He's so ecstatic because he's never owned a pair of shoes. Tournament ends. I go to my, at the time, assistant coach / co-founder and said, look, he can't be the only kid in LA that needs shoes. We need to think about what we want to do with this. Mm-hmm. So we agreed to make it a nonprofit. And from that date to now, we've donated close to 5,000 pairs of shoes.
Great story. That's awesome. And it, it speaks to the crux of what we do as coaches to give back and to take it even further. And the fact that the kids were the ones that started this idea and then you were able to run with it and, probably change a bunch of kids' lives. That's really impressive. And towards the end of this, we'll make sure we get that information put in the show notes so people can help support the program. Outside of your club basketball journey, what other coaching journey or what other pieces on the coaching path can you share with us that have led to where you are today?
So, I mean, like I stated earlier, I started my first ever coaching situation was at a Boys and Girls Club in Santa Monica, where in which I grew up. As far as from a athletic standpoint, after school care, I mean, I'm from Inglewood. I grew up in Inglewood. Once my mom became a banker in Santa Monica, everything started happening in Santa Monica for me. And so that's when I got my first taste of it. But looking back, I always had really good coaches. And they weren't just X's and O's. It was, hey, my mom's working late. Oh, you need a ride home? You need food? You need, okay. Well, coach, my mom gave me money. No, I got this. So though at a young age, you don't think about it, you're gracious, but that's it. Then you become a coach and then you realize, hey, this is mandated if you love doing this. It's something you have to do because you love it and you care about people more than you care about the sport. So that's how my mentality has always been as a young coach and as a now a veteran coach. So it went from the young children to, a club team to then I started coaching at Crossroads in 8th grade. And then the varsity coach, which was my high school coach, had a vacancy and he brought me up to be his assistant. And that's kind of what got me started on a higher level. And then he would send me to coaching clinics. He and I started a clinic and, that's how I got to this point. And it's taken me all over the country. I've seen how it's positively and negatively affected the community. Sports is a dichotomy. Sports is great, but there's a lot of bad things too. So I've just been fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of good guys, good women, good mentors, good directors. I've learned a lot even from athletic directors that it's always bigger than what you're doing. I used to have a bad habit, Climo, of leaning towards the better players because those are going to be your captains. Those are going to be the guys you lean on to do what you can't do in the locker room. As I got older, I learned it's that guy at the end of the bench who actually needs the most attention because he's not going to go on to play in college. She's not going to go on to play in college, but she might be CEO of something. And that's the one that's going to help that superstar. That's the one's going to help you and donate to your program when you start a program. And that's what I've learned probably in the last 10 years is that it's a cliche. We say you're only strong as the weakest link, but it's actual fact.
Well, I think it's interesting because your journey as a coach is not the ordinary one, right? Where you work your way up to whatever level you think you're destined to do, or you try different hats on and you come back. Yours has always been a lot more organic as far as there's a need, you step in, you fill that role. And as other needs present themselves, you just kind of jump in, and it's really inspiring. And the follow-up question I usually ask is, what did you still need to figure out when you became the head coach? It's so different for you because the hats you've worn are so different, but what do you think you can offer in addition to what you just shared about making sure you pay attention to all of your athletes? But what else do you think you can offer based on your experience as a coach? These are the things that I wish I would have known.
I wish I would have known. Definitely, you don't need to get all of your tidbits from someone in your profession. Meaning, go watch the soccer guy, soccer girl. Go watch the water polo coach. Go watch the football coach because you are running an organization when you're a head coach. You're not just running a team, you're running an organization. You're dealing with the managers, you're dealing with parents, you're dealing with athletic director, You're dealing with egos. You're dealing with emotions. You're dealing with people who don't want to be there, or maybe playing because of family pressure. There is just so much going on than just what's happening day to day. And I would tell anyone that's aspiring to get into this or who's currently in it, sometimes you have to step back, remove yourself from the situation, and go seek advice or go pick the brains of people who aren't in your profession. Go, you may even go to just a business guy. How do you run your company? How do you run your office? What is day to day like? What is the morale? How do you keep the morale up? It's funny, you know, there were times I couldn't stand Bob as a basketball coach, Bob Williams, who I love dearly. But if you walk into one of my practices, you would know that I played for Bob. It's organized, it's to the T on the clock management. If and when we have access to the clock. So at Crossroads, I don't always have access to the clock. Whether there's a varsity practice before us, we get to use the clock. But if volleyball had the gym, the clock's not set up, or there's a game after us. But if I have the clock, okay, we're doing defensive slides, 5 minutes. We start the clock. 5 minutes are up, we've moved on, or we stopped the clock to instruct, but we moved on. All of my players can look at their watches if they're not at practice and probably tell you what we're doing. Now, we try to make it fun and exciting and compete, but it is structured. And I learned that obviously from experiencing it, but kids love it because I go watch other practices that aren't as structured. And practice ends, kids are complaining, well, we didn't work on this, or I didn't get to do that. Well, our guys know what's coming. Now, we may add a wrinkle here and there, but they know we're on the clock. It's precise. I can't walk here. I got to jog to this. I got to do that. And so that's really what I take away from it is when you do that, you're also teaching these young men and young ladies that organization is important. They now become better students. They now become better wives. They now become better husbands. They now become better employees because they got that structure.
Right. It's interesting that, you could summarize what you just said in regards to they know what to expect. It doesn't change a whole lot. There may be a wrinkle. We're organized. Here's how we're going to do it. And, when we were talking with Brandon the other day, he said there's beauty in simplicity, right? And as a young coach, we often try to do too much, try to get cute and creative. And what I've learned after 25 years is you don't need all that. Figure out who you are, what you believe in, what group you have in the gym, and then, reload, repeat, and keep it simple. On your journey and your observations of others, getting your kids involved in soccer and other things that you mentioned to me before as they are younger, what are the things that have traveled with you across industry, across platform that you utilize regardless of situation? These are the foundations of what I believe in as a leader, as a coach, and will always come with me no matter where I am.
Well, one would be as simple as the word workout. So I heard the term growing up a lot. I'm sure you heard it a lot. Every kid by the time they get to me has heard it a lot, but no one really teaches young men and young women what the out is. And if you've ever watched a practice of mine, our guys know what out is. You got to work outside of your comfort zone. You're going to love and hate every practice we have. You're going to love it because you're going to get better, but you're going to hate it because you're going to work hard. You're never, ever going to work harder at any level of sports than you are with me. I'm not going to kill you. You're not going to hate the sport, but you're going to learn to work outside your comfort zone because you're not always going to play the sport. This has an end date, and you can't not do for your family. You can't not do for your husband. You can't not do for your wife. You're going to be uncomfortable. And this is not going to be the first time. So if you play for me, you're going to be uncomfortable and it won't be your last time. But when that uncomfortable happens, I'm also going to be there to pick you up. I'm also going to be there to encourage you. And I'm also going to be there to let you know you made it. When you threw up and hop back in that line, that shows you're ready for the next level, whatever that next level may be. I've carried that with me everywhere I've gone. With Soul Brothers as an organization, with Soul Brothers as a basketball program, with Crossroads, with me as a husband, with me as a father. I push my family and I push myself, and we've gotten out of our comfort zones, and we've had success from it, and we've had failures.
Great answer. Coach, how would you say over the course of your 20 plus years of doing this at this point across industry, your approach to coaching has changed?
Number one thing, I've become a lot more empathetic. I've learned over the years that kid comes to practice, he or she's upbeat, making shots or passing the ball, they're defending, but they aren't smiling as much, or they aren't as vocal as they were the last month. Something may be going on, whether it's with them personally, whether it's them family, whatever it may be. I've also learned that when you criticize, when you get on a kid, when you rip a kid, I mean rip him. I don't mean you should have made that pass. I'm telling you, just lay into him. There needs to be a follow-up, whether it's after practice, during practice, or as soon as they do something positive, you better be the loudest person in the gym. That gives you cachet. So now that young man or young woman is going to run through the wall for you. It took me a while to figure that out. I was always at one extreme or the other. So I was your number one fan, but I was your toughest critic. There was no middle ground. And as I've gotten older, I've learned to be in the middle more often than not, to be empathetic, like I said before. And what kind of catapulted that was in 2000, I was in a motorcycle accident, and it was near fatal. I had broken, I think 12 or 13 ribs. And at the time, I didn't even know we had 12 or 13 ribs, to be honest with you. Had a C6 and C7 spinal cord fracture, collapsed lung, severed a nerve in my spinal cord, which caused paralysis in my right arm. And, I was on a ventilator for, I think it was 5 days, and induced coma. So, and had no surgeries. So I was in ICU for 17 days and the hospital for 21 days. So when I came home, I had a back brace from the nape of my neck all the way down to the bottom of my spine. Had to relearn how to walk, had to relearn how to shave, had to relearn how to do a lot of different things. Fortunately, family and so-called friends, when I say so-called, the people who supported me, it's kind of hard to call them friends. That's family, right? So I had a lot of support, just motivating me, you're going to make it, you're going to get through this, so on and so forth. So once everything I healed and I got back into coaching, everything became bigger than coaching. It became life. Now when I'm teaching a kid or talking to a kid, I care about the kid. Even if I never see him again, after the 2 years he plays with me or 4 years he plays with me, I care. What did that morph into? I've been to weddings, I've been to baby showers, I've been to bar mitzvahs, I've been to birthday parties, all from former players. Guys wanting to get in business, call and pick my brain. Guys who want to propose. That all these different things. And I'm not just saying that all that came from post-accident, but I will say it changed my perspective on life in general, obviously, but on the game, because it really is, you never know what's going to be taken away from you.
Right.
And make it current in our situation, we have COVID. So we said it as a cliche, but our guys aren't playing, our girls aren't playing. There's a pandemic. So I've learned to cherish every moment and project that on to our athletes or my athletes.
Interesting connection. And I love it, bringing it all the way back to where we are right now. And not everybody is going to have that experience. And I'm sure you wouldn't wish that on anyone. So how do you take your takeaways and your ability to apply that transformational time for you where you could, retarget your optical, focus, your focus on, you said empathy, but also, being about the whole player and not just, you're a basketball player, but you're a person. How do you help people that are starting off in this profession to get there? And everyone has to go through their journey to experience these things, but what do you offer in regards to advice for the young coach getting into this to help them accelerate that part of their journey so that they can have more transformational relationships earlier on in their career?
Well, hopefully that coach has played that sport at some level. I don't even care if it's park and rec, and have had an experience of being coached, because I tell a story often about what happened with me at Davis.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I had a pretty good junior year. I don't think the coaching staff thought I had a pretty good junior year. So coming into my senior year, Coach Williams tells me he's not going to put me on the program, because the tradition had been to put seniors on the program, and he thought there was a chance I wasn't going to make the team. I was livid.
Mm-hmm.
I was livid. That very next practice, I was picking up guys 94 feet. I was fouling. I was pushing. I was making every shot I took, making every correct pass, because there was no way that I was going to have my senior year and not make the team. That was out.
Right.
And it made me a better person. It made me a better player, because it taught me at that young of an age, you can't take things for granted. You can't assume anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Bob was lighting a fire under my ass or if he was serious, but
Mm-hmm.
whatever it was, it made me a better basketball player and a better human.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that to say this, Klein. If you've never experienced adversity as a player, you can't empathize with your student athletes, with your athletes. You can't. You need to be able to tell stories that you've experienced what they've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
There is no player that I've ever coached that I haven't experienced what they've gone through. Whether they were the best player, I've been the best player on my team. Whether you were the fourth best player, I've been the guy who isn't the guy, but you're counting on him to do his job. And I've been the guy fighting and scrapping for playing time.
Mm-hmm.
And no, not every coach is going to have that, but you should fall somewhere along those lines. So that way, when your athlete is in a situation, you can tell a story that they can relate to. Like, I can relate to not winning a CIF championship as a sophomore because of a turnover I made.
Mm-hmm.
I can relate to, as a junior, winning a CIF championship and not playing 11 seconds of the entire game.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't the best player on the team. The best player on our team ended up being the 14th overall pick
Mm-hmm.
as a lottery pick. So
Right.
Clearly I wasn't the best player, but I was the point guard.
Right.
I mattered.
Right.
So if you can't tell those stories, you better tell them in your life. It better be something you've experienced, because these young men and women have to be able to relate to you. That's the number one thing as a coach. If they can't relate, if you're on a totem pole, you're high up, and they can't get through you only through assistance, emails, and text messages,
Mm-hmm.
you got to find a new profession. They got to be able to relate. They got to want to call you at times. They got to want to send you a text. They got to want to crack a joke.
Yep.
If you can't do that, this is the wrong profession.
It's funny, the story that you share, because, being there with you and going through that, in addition to a million other of those adverse moments during that time and following, I would even argue, to bring that home in your point, they don't necessarily have to have that adversity in the sport they're coaching, but somewhere, as you said, to make a connection, to be able to share. Hey, sports are a vehicle to teach you to be part of something bigger than yourself, right? Absolutely. This isn't about you. It's a we thing. And how do we help you to learn to embrace and star in whatever role you happen to be playing on particular team, group, organization? And where those moments show up and the impact they have, listening to that story. I mean, I remember from 2 years before, when we were at Cal State LA, and we were up and we thought the game was over, and then we didn't dive for a ball, and they hit a buzzer beater, and a player came in the locker room, and I'll never not dive for a ball again. And it was like transformational in that moment. And, where he is now as a professional is probably directly related to that one moment.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's interesting that you say that, but those moments can be found anywhere, right? Where did you fail? And where did you get an opportunity for redemption? And you used the story about coach, and I have a similar story where, I got fired as a manager because, I wasn't committed enough, or I, hadn't done what I was supposed to do. But the ability to work my way back from that, and him to give me a second chance, whether it was the fire you mentioned or whatever, transformational moment as a 19-year-old. So thank you for bringing those up. As you've watched other teams throughout your career, not just basketball, but other sports, other leaders, other organizations. What takeaways have you implemented in your own life and journey?
Ooh, great question. Number one takeaway really is work ethic. You know, I watch college football on Saturdays. You know, you hear the stories of Saban not sleeping and being in the office. You hear stories about, uh, the guy at UConn and how he recruits and how he goes into homes and how he talks to parents and how he relates to players. You know, I take little tidbits from all of those people, and the number one thing you take out of it is the person they are. You know, they don't really, when you talk about the greats and the most influential coaches, no matter what sport it is, you always hear that they were good people. I mean, unless you go back to the 40s and 50s when the Bear Bryants of the world, but post that era, they're always good people. You know, I was fortunate enough to a family friend. I've trained him a few times, but he's really a family friend. He's really family, Darrell Wright. And, Darrell played in Miami. He was there when Coach Spo was in the film room, when he was moving up as an assistant. And, the stories he would tell about Spo is the person he was. Not so much, his X's and O's. He's going to be the person, how he would relate to his players. And so I've always wanted to be that guy. If you ever happen to meet a guy that played for me, he'll tell you that I was a hard ass, but he'll tell you I loved him. And that's what I take from the Sabans of the world. You know, those guys who are at the top of their game, their players love them. They come back. Alumni come back. You know, I coached at the varsity level at Crossroads for 2 years. I was an assistant. I got to coach 6 games as a head. And after that, I went back down to middle school. Now I'm back in JV. And when players come back, the smiles that I get lets me know that what I've taken from these other coaches, I've applied it and I'm getting it in return.
Well, I think it's interesting that you note that, because I think the initial takeaway, if people aren't listening behind the words, is, oh, I got to stay up till 5 a.m. I got to be in there and burning the candle at both ends. And that's not even, the message, right? It's that I cared about this individual, and not as a player, but as a person. And throughout this conversation, as pretty much a basketball guy, right? You haven't dabbled in a ton of other things in your life in regards to the athletic fields, but you are also saying throughout this conversation that the basketball piece isn't really that important. We haven't talked X's and O's. You haven't said, hey, this play that I got is really important, and you want to, dive into this and share this with people. But it's, how are you impacting these kids' lives? And I think your organization, Soul Brothers, is a derivative of that approach to life and how you can give back. And I think that's been, really important on your journey.
Quick story. Wait, before you pivot.
Yep.
So this year, JV team, we had this guy on our team. His name is, I won't say his last name. His name is Jake. His dad is a big time music mogul. And this kid is a multi-sport athlete. And he's extremely athletic. He can do everything on a basketball court except dunk. And I mean everything. He can do everything on a baseball field except hit a 500-foot home run. But he can pitch, he can catch, he can play in the infield, he can play in the outfield. He can do it all. He was a soccer player growing up. This dude is extremely athletic. So in our team, he was like our quote-unquote glue guy, because he wasn't the best shooter, but you couldn't leave him open. He wasn't the best ball handler, but he can get a defensive rebound and get to the rack in 3 dribbles. But some games he would start, some games he wouldn't start. So there was a particular game, his minutes were fluctuating. He wasn't playing very well. He was turning the ball over. It just wasn't going well. And so he was at the end of the bench, just mumbling, mouthing off, talking crazy. So I went down to the bench and made a mistake. We got into a heated argument during the game. Ultimately, I kicked him off the bench and sent him into the locker room. My assistant, great guy, walks into the locker room, calms Jake down, tries to bring him back. They come back. He comes back out of the locker room and says, Jake wants to come back. I said, no, he's done for tonight. I thought he was going to quit because he has no aspirations of playing college basketball. This dude plays because it's fun and he's athletic enough to get minutes, but he's not on the path of some of the other guys. So I thought he was done. We get back in the locker room. We win the game. We finish our spiel. And he asked me, can he speak? So he's in tears. He apologizes to the team. He apologizes to me. So we all hug it out. The guys leave. He and I stay in the locker room. I stay back. I actually apologized to him because I told him I lost my cool. Whether I should have kicked you off the bench or not is a separate discussion, but we should have never gotten to that point. And after that, this is a kid who doesn't work out in the spring, doesn't work out in the summer. When basketball ends, he's doing his thing. He's worked out all spring and all summer with me. We text each other probably once or twice a week outside of working out. I've learned who he is as a person. I've learned about his girlfriends, his likes and dislikes. I've learned more about his parents. If that situation hadn't happened, if I hadn't gone back to him and told him I made a mistake, I don't know that our relationship is the same. And I probably would bet money that he and I are going to be quote unquote friends for the rest of my life.
Right. All based on that moment where the relationship was tested. And however you got there, without those moments are okay, as long as you navigate them well. And I think as a leader, have to look within, right? And figure out what role did I play in this and how can I make that part right? Even if the other person or the other group that's part of that adverse situation can't acknowledge their own issues in that moment, right? We have to lead and we have to try to correct our role in that. And I think that's a really important lesson that people can take from this. Here's a curveball for you, Trey. Let's say that for whatever reason, you up and leave and you were to come, let's say here, and now you're in charge of the program and you got to run with it, right? And what are the things that you need to focus on right away when you land?
I would want to know who I'm working with and what their experiences are. I want to know who they are as a person. I want to know what their thoughts of feelings and emotions are outside of the sport. I want to know what their commitment level is after and before practice and games.
As athletes or as administration?
As administration, because I believe it trickles down, even at the high school level. It's not as serious as college or professional, but it does trickle down. The student athlete needs to know that they're supported by administration. Administration needs to know that they're supported by their coaches, and their coaches need to know that they're supported by both parties. So I would need to get a feel of that before we did anything. And then from a coaching standpoint, I want to know what my coaches' positive experiences have been from an administrative standpoint and from their own standpoint and from a player standpoint. And I would want to know what their negative experiences were. And then I would hold a meeting or an assembly with each particular team, and I want them to throw everything at me. Not just from a Q&A standpoint. I want to know their gripes. I want to know what went well. I would want to know what they want to change. I would want to know what they want more of. So that way I know what I'm walking into. I know what I want to keep, because there may be things I don't like, but that should stay. And I won't know the answer to that. I got to get that from the group at large. So that would be my first.
I think that's great advice, right? Because you're not coming in saying, well, I'm going to do this, this, and this. It's I need to gather information. I need to understand the situation. I need to understand the clientele. I need to understand my bosses. I need to understand what I'm working in, with, and for before I can make any decisions. And I think that comes with experience, right? When we were younger, we would have probably said, here's the outline, here's the plan, this is how we're going to do it. And I think the answer today is much more, it depends.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great. I think that's a great way to end this thing with the advice for coaches. And I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. See you soon.
Yes, sir.